Welcome once again to the NPTEL MOOC module on handling large scale unit level data with Stata. We are here at the verge of the penultimate section of understanding Stata operations for the unit level data. So, this is purely dedicated to panel data estimations, panel data understanding and estimation through Stata. And the previous sections are largely on understanding Stata through cross sectional approaches, also on qualitative variable models. And even from the beginning of the lectures, if you recapitulate, that was largely discussing on the understanding of unit level data, then sampling design to some extent where we can connect to the unit level data and Stata. And then we started with cross sectional approaches of understanding Stata, then qualitative dependent variable and independent variable models. Now, the last week is dedicated for the panel models. So, since panel is very important, especially for the scholars, for the researchers who deal with the information for over a time period, or over a invariant or variant observations. Or in variables, in that case panel making panel or observing from panel data is very important. Now, why am I saying researchers do need of panel data, especially for publications in the topmost journal, because this has contents which can be connected to a larger cohort, a larger sections, and because of the fact that it either through through appending or through merging, we can able to deal with both the section, cross sectional issues as well as over time issues. Okay. And when over time aspects are added, there are possibility of drawing better inferences, especially for policy purposes. So, panel is very important. In this lecture I am going to discuss what is panel data, why panel data is necessary, what are the different types of panel data, and how to understand whether the data is panel or not. Okay. And if it is panel, then how we can handle with our Stata package for understanding or interpretation of the data. Okay. So, now coming to the meaning of panel data. Panel data usually collected over time and over the same individuals. Okay. So, the individuals which is represented over different time and their responses over time is discussed in the panel data approach. In technical terms, panel data contains information on many cross sectional units observed across time. So, in short, panel data have space as well as time dimensions. So, space we mean the cross sectional aspects as well as over time. Okay. So, like time series data, panel data contains observation collected at regular frequency or regular timing. So, like cross sectional data, panel data contains observations across collection of individuals as well. Okay. So, it is a overlapping of cross sectional and time series. Now, there are other names of panel data as well. What are those? Those are called pooled data. Pooled, basically pulling up time series and cross sectional observations, and we will clarify all those in our successive slides. Then this is also called combination of time series and cross sectional data. Micro panel data, we are going to clarify whether micro or macro. Longitudinal data. So, generally the time aspects is very variable okay, in case of longitudinal data. And another one is called event history analysis, especially when we have some study on the movement over time of subjects through successive states of or conditions, is called event history. Okay, and the last part of the panel data analysis is called, or names of panel data analysis is called cohort analysis as well. Okay. So, we can study panel data at macro as well as micro level units. Now, at macro level, what is generally in aggregate sense, like units of analysis can be countries where number of observation, that is n, is small and time period is large. Okay, that is called macro panel data. And so, in case of macro T, the time period, basically the countries, usually the number of countries are limited. Okay, and if the time for each country over maybe 15 years, 20 years, and even within the year there are quarters, or within quarter there are months, then within months also there are different time period. Okay, so large time, if time exceeds then that of the n number of observations. Okay. If that exceeds, then that type of panel is called cross sectional time series data. Okay, that is simply called cross sectional time series data. At micro level, the units of analysis could be individual or households or firm where n is large. Okay, especially the number of observation is large, where the t is small. When it is very micro based study, the number of cases to be observed is more important than that of the time. So, it is not just n that matters here. Had it been only n, we could have mentioned that is called cross sectional data, but now a t is added, but t varies very less, or the number of time period, that is t, is very small. That type of data is actually called micro panel data. Okay. So, now I am clarifying another aspects, like I mean those things I am clarifying through example as well. So, because of its highly informative nature, panel data is increasingly used in econometrics, financial analysis, social sciences and medicine field, etc. Now, in macroeconomics, we are citing some examples for it. In macroeconomics, like for stock market, currency exchange rate, international trade, okay, or monetary units, any aspects we generally give, those are in aggregate, are called macro based panel data. Whereas microeconomics we generally deal with so far on unemployment, like we have already cited for PLFS data, periodic labor force survey data, those come up with with panel very recently, usually not in the early period, but now in the recent from 2017-18 to 2018-19 into period, even within one period of survey also panel contents are there. Now, we will be clarifying which kind of panel it contains, okay, through our operations. Now, also we have panel data of microeconomics type is through ISDS, India's Human Development Survey also. If you just wanted to have other panel from microeconomic context, if you look at Young Life data, Young Life survey, okay, so that contains data of 4 countries in the world. That is also based on purely a panel model. Similarly, even if the data is not panel, we have some techniques to make it panel, how to make it and not, our successive lectures somehow will guide you. Now, coming to finance aspects, stock like examples like stock price by firms, market volatility by country or firm, etc. are example of panel data. Okay, so we have now given in the note ISDS is the only longitudinal data available in India. So far as a clear cut cross sectional coverage of different aspects of human development is concerned is very much available in the ISDS data, okay, and that is also a panel. Now, question again occur, which kind of panel, balance or unbalanced, we are going to clarify very shortly. Now, coming to the notations for panel data, like just understanding panel is not enough, we need to focus on what is the crux behind panel, what is the rationale behind panel, what are the model behind panel, why we are concerned about panel. We need to understand through some theoretical or equation based approach, okay, to have a clear start for the panel model. So, now we are clarifying one by one. A double subscript is used, but in case of cross sectional, since time was not there, the subscript is only I, not j component is not there or t component is not there. So, here double subscript is one for the cross sectional observation and another is for the time component. Okay. So, subscript I is used for cross sections or entities, say maybe country, maybe household, maybe individual or firm, whereas in our example we will discuss about country or firm, and n in this case is number of entities. So, this can be noted as I varies from 1 to n if we are citing number of country to be n. Okay. Now, similarly T denotes time period, like maybe year, month, quarter, whatever, but T small t we are counting for the time period specifically, and total T capital T is identifying the number of time period in total. Okay. So, it spans from 1 from capital T. Now, coming to the discussion of double subscripts, once again this distinguishes cross section and time series data. Okay. It is not, it is amalgamation usually. Now, panel data with k regressors, now we are emphasizing the regressors, can be represented here as first x 1 of ith individual, for t is the time period, then this is the second time period, second regressor till kth regression if you are interested to estimate, then our impact on the variable we can find out through y, okay, y on x. So, we have already clarified subscripts. Now, we are presenting here a lucid picture of panel like entities or n we wanted to mention through here in our first column that represents the n. Okay. N suppose the first individual may be firm, okay, first or maybe country. If the data is presented here, we are mentioning time first period, then here it is second period, then till tth period. Okay. Now, the notation here for the for the dependent variable or the for the regression is as y11 because for the first entity and its impact, and this is for the second time period. Okay. 1 2 stands for the time period. Then I will discuss it here. All right. So, now till tth period, tth period, if tth period data is given for the first category individual, then it is interpreted like this. Now, similarly for others can be interpreted for nth observations could be interpreted like this. Okay. Now, question here occurs, either we can interpret like this vertically, okay, or we can interpret horizontal also. We are going to discuss that in a short while. Okay. So, when we interpret this t here, another t is here, another t is here, okay, horizontally or in a wide format, that is called wide panel data. When we are putting it vertically, that is called a long panel. Okay. We are going to discuss this in a short while, what is the necessity of long panel and what is the necessity of wide panel. Okay. Now, before going to discuss all those things, all those conceptual details, advantages of panel data through Baltagi suggested some aspects of panel over cross section and time series data, that since panel data relates to cross sections over time, heterogeneity can be captured in units of observation. The heterogeneity is very important in the modeling. The techniques of panel data estimation can take such heterogeneity into account by allowing individual specific effects or subject specific variables with observation that span both time and individuals in a cross section. Panel data gives more informative data and more variability, less collinearity among variables, more degrees of freedom and more efficiency. Okay. These are specific advantages of panel data. And panel data is better suited than cross sectional data for studying the dynamics of change. Okay, in cross sectional dynamics of change is not captured, because we are not only at maximum, at over cross section variable over another variable we can check, but not over time. So there are many examples possible for it. Panel data can better detect and measure effects that cannot be observed in pure cross sections and pure time series data. We can investigate how an event changes the outcome, like some policies or law. Okay, so that is why I said from the beginning that this data is highly useful for policy interpretation or policy prescription, okay, or some intervention approach as well. If your technique or model is very appropriate, then through the panel data you can find out the impact of the interventions. Okay. So, panel data enables the study of more complex behavioral models also, because some forms of interventions through the behavioral change could be captured. Okay, like the effects of technological change or economic cycles, or even the in the health cases like in COVID-19, we are now at the verge of conclusion of the classes for NPTEL. We are now in the at the 36th lecture. This is the very crucial time in the world so far as COVID is concerned. Okay, and now some studies have identified placebo effect. Okay, placebo effect of COVID. All right. So, placebo effect without giving any physical medicine, some impact has been observed as if the medicine has been invented, though medicine in reality does not exist. So, but still patients feel that I have been given medicine and I am getting cured. So, that means the government or the particular institution is doing fantastic. So, some observation of such variety and the policy implication could be observed during the COVID time also. Okay, and now we are we are recording over the very crucial pandemic time. Okay. So, anyway, let's come to the discussion of panel and its advantages once again. Panel data minimize the effects of aggregation bias, okay, from aggregating forms into broad groups. All right. So, like just getting the broad groups in cross section is very difficult, but here since a time component is there, it may help making a group better, and that may not be biased. Okay. Now, coming to the disadvantages of panel data, there are some problems such as sampling design and coverage is very crucial, and in case of micro panel data there is high chances of non-response. Okay. Yes, that is the reason why we have already said micro panel, where the observation the number of observation is higher than that of the T, the time period. And but all the observation may not have responses, okay, because since it is highly qualitative, observations usually in cross sectional approaches are qualitative and cross sectional. So, there are number of behavioral approach attached, behavioral responses attached, responses may not be there every time. So, it is very challenging to convert them into a panel format. Okay. So, similarly, in the case of macro panel data, there exists cross country dependency. Okay. So, correlation between countries are also there. Okay. So, cross country dependency, how those can be reduced, like in our entries, one country, second country, third country, if you do it, they might be also dependent to each other. So, that how to tackle that is a very important challenge and very difficult in this case. Observations are very likely not independent. Okay, that is another problem. May be independent through cross sectional, but over time might be dependent. Okay, so it is there are some disadvantages of the panel data. Panel data faces a problem of endogeneity. Basically, the error term is correlated with the explanatory variables and the omitted variable bias. So, variable if gets omitted because of larger cohort we are taking may be very problematic. In case of omitted variable bias, that actually occurs when we actually leaves out or omit or drop by any reason, by any unnoticed approach or steps. if that is leaves out, that is creating omitted variable bias. So, coming to some of the example, like consider a panel data set with the fast wave of observation at time t1. If x measured at time 1 and t influences y at time t2, we can exclude the possibility that a measure of y at time t0 does not itself exert a causal influence on x at t1. Okay. So, basically over the time period, how the influence is observed is very difficult to capture, and how it is captured because of the problem by endogeneity and omitted variable bias is a matter of concern, and those are the challenges attached with panel data to tackle. Coming to the data structure, we can distinguish various data structure like cross section, time series, panel, within panel, different types of panel. So, cross section data we have already said many times is basically the responses at a fixed point in time. We usually denote with x varies from 1 to n, and here the interest of the researcher is to find the heterogeneity across individuals, how individuals are varying across different heterogeneous groups or variables. Coming to the time series data, usually most focus is on understanding stationarity or understanding the trend, trend of the particular variable over time. Now, data usually is in a series of a particular time period or intervals. Now, sequence of information that attaches a time period to each value is important. It is denoted as x t, where t varies from 1 to t, that is time period. Now, another data usually discussed called pooling of the data, different like two or more independent sets of the same type could be pooled. Okay. So, it can be pooled time series or pooled cross section. In case of pooled time series data could be pooled and cross section data could be pooled depending upon the independent data with the same type of independent data, series of data. Now, coming to the case of pooled time series, the number of observation is small. Observation is small, but t is large, we have already mentioned. So, observation are viewed as repeated measures at each point of time. So, parameters can be estimated with high precision due to an increased sample size. In case of pooled cross section, number of time is usually very small, is not it? The unit observations are chosen randomly. This means hardly any unit of observation of one cross section is member of another one. Okay. So, because of cross sectional approaches. Now, the last aspect of the data is important, that is we are covering now, called panel data. Panel data already clarified the basics of it. Now, discussing once again that after understanding cross section and panel, when we combine both are called panel. Panel data could be balanced or could be unbalanced. What do you mean by balance? Then balance where the same number of observations are repeated every time, it is actually the same. Okay. In other words, it has same number of time observation on each of the n individuals. So, every time the same time and same number of individuals continued in the data called balanced data, balanced panel data. Balanced panel data has no missing values. Okay, that is more important. That is why we are saying it has to be 100% same. Okay, missing values should not be there. But whereas in case of unbalanced panel, it has different number of time observations on each entity or individuals or subjects. Unbalanced panel data set have missing values at some time observation for some of the subjects. Now, this is the time component we are mentioning here, like you look at t here, t is mentioned over time for the individual 1 here, individual 1 varies over time. Now, the individual 1 is changing to 2, then to I, then to n. Okay. So, in total we are going to discuss n times t, total number of observations in the series of the panel. If each of the entries are very valid, then those type of data without any missing value called balanced panel data. Okay. Total number of observation in this case is NT. Since balanced panel are empirically easier to handle than that of unbalanced counterparts. The researcher who do empirical estimation often make efforts to create balanced panel. Okay. So, balanced panel is easy to operate. Now, as I pointed earlier, understanding the organization of the panel data, usually it is of two ways that has been organized. One is called wide panel or wide form panel data and long form panel data. How the panel data could be organized, could be entered. Okay. The wide form has a column for each variable period and a row for each individual. Each row, but your time for each period we have like GVA, gross value added, is another period GVA is mentioned. Okay. So, the but in case of long it is entered vertically. Okay. We will show it. Here is the case, the first case is the second case. One time invariant variable is given sex, where it is given for this individual. Now, GVA for this individual is given as 2 times. Okay. In period 2 and period 3 it is given here. Alright. So, but in case of long panel the entries are kept vertically. Okay. Now, a single record of for each combination of unit and time period, multiple rows for case. Okay. For case there should be multiple rows, like this year is our unit of the panel. Now, here 2012 2 times is entered for the same, that for our per case is 2012. Now, there are double entry for what? For GVA there are look at this. Okay. So, earlier in our case we entered as GVA in different variable in the column, but here in another row we have entered. Similarly, 2013 also. Alright. So, now coming to coming to some other features of these data are like a time invariant unique identifier for each enterprise, that is ENTID we used to discuss in our 7th NSS data. Okay. And basically what it contains, okay, what the data contains, it contains time invariant unique identifier variable, that is time invariant. Then indicator of time, the T has to be mentioned, has to be mentioned, the time period has to be mentioned. Then the time invariant variable, that is sex in our case, that is invariant over time, okay, that is fixed. Okay. Then a time varying variable, that is GVA over time, that gets varies, we mentioned. Now, the long form is usually most convenient. The long form basically we are arranging vertically, okay, a number of rows increases in that case. Long form is usually very convenient and needed panel data format in Stata. The vast majority of Stata command work best when the data is in long format. Okay. But the wide format layout of repeated measures data is useful when doing multivariate analysis. So, in case of multivariate analysis, that is where you use the wide format. We need to take a note here that we can easily convert the wide form to long form through the command called reshape. Okay. And reshape command in Stata, that can be easily converted. In ISDS data and how to convert those data, we will do it in our other successive lectures. ISDS provides a panel in both wide and long format. If you go to their site, you will get those details separately. Linking file also, where we can link that panel through the linking variables. Those linking files, if you are interested, is also available for creating a panel on your own. This will also be covered in our successive lectures. Now, the types of panel data based on time dimension is important. We have already mentioned micro and macro panel. Now, based on the observations and the time. Now, again another clarification we wanted to do it here, called short panel and long panel. Okay, like the time dimension panel data is classified as short or long, whereas when the individual unit, that is we already mentioned, when the individual unit, that is n, is greater than that of the t time period, that is called in fact that is called short panel. Okay. Whereas usually in our micro study or in our cross sectional panel data, we usually go for the short panel. In case of long panel, the reverse is true, the time period is higher than that of the number of observations. So, short panels are very common than the long panels. The estimation technique depends on whether we have short or long panel. Now, IHDS data is actually called a short panel data. Around 41,554 households were surveyed for two time period, two waves, that is IHDS 1 and 2. Okay. So, those are the details we explained in this lecture. Basically the conceptual framework of the very basic concepts of panel data, and in the next class we will also give further details of conceptual framework on panel data in order to start the application of with this data. With this, let me stop here. Thank you.